Jazz and hip-hop. It's a relationship that's ancestral. Two of the most influential music genres to ever come out of the United States. The improvisation, grooves, rhythm, and sound of jazz continues to influence hip-hop to this day.
Hip-hop is indebted to jazz. That's not up for debate. But let's not act like hip-hop hasn't influenced jazz either. Later, LA and I are going to work together to create our own jazz hip-hop track. But first, let's talk about how these genres continue to cross-pollinate today.
Before we get into the history of how this cross-pollination came to be, let's test your knowledge on some jazz and hip-hop trivia. Who's the jazz artist behind this go-to sample in hip-hop? If you guessed keyboardist Bob James, you're correct. James has been called hip-hop's unlikely godfather and has been sampled in over 700 hip-hop songs, making him the most sampled jazz artist of all time. Next is true or false. Is Nas's father a trumpet player? That's true. Olu Dara is a trumpet player who has played alongside Art Blakey's Jazz Messengers and, of course, his own son, Nas, appearing on the rapper's seminal debut album, Illmatic. Now one more. Who's the legendary jazz artist that has referred to Kendrick Lamar as a genius? Yep. Herbie Hancock described Kendrick as such in a 2019 New York Times interview. So, did you get them all right? If so, good job. If not, that's fine. You're gonna learn more now.
Today, jazz and hip-hop are like peanut butter and jelly. Their relationship is so well known that it's hard to imagine one without the other. And despite their musical differences, they're both an artistic expression of what it means to be Black in America. But the pairing of jazz and lyrical wordplay existed long before hip-hop was created in the late 70s. Let's go back to 1920s Harlem, where Black art and literary figures were leading a renaissance. There were many figures pivotal to the Harlem Renaissance, among them, the legendary poet Langston Hughes. Hughes is credited as the creator of jazz poetry, which means poetry that demonstrates a jazz-like rhythm or the feel of improvisation. Take this live rendition of his classic poem, The Weary Blues, for example.
The singer stopped playing and went to bed, while the weary blues echoed through his head.
40 years after the Harlem Renaissance, figures like Amiri Baraka would take the idea of jazz poetry further during the Black arts movement of the 60s and 70s.
Against his lost white children, Black Dada Nihilismus.
By 1970, jazz poetry had found itself in the hands of people who are now regarded as hip-hop's godfathers, Gil Scott-Heron and the Last Poets. A continuation of what Hughes and Baraka did, Scott-Heron and the Last Poets used cadence, improvisation, and rhythms of jazz to create poetry that spoke on the Black American experience. However, where Hughes and Baraka performed with full jazz ensembles, Scott-Heron and the Last Poets sometimes performed alongside just conga players, percussion, and nothing else.
When the revolution comes, white death will fall off the walls of museums and churches, breaking the lie that enslaved our mothers when the revolution comes.
As the 1970s came to a close, hip-hop was born. The new genre would borrow less from jazz and more from upbeat disco and funk. But jazz remained influential, as you'll soon find out.
So when did jazz and hip-hop's cross-pollination really begin? Well, you can say it traces back to hip-hop's beginnings with this 1979 hip-hop classic. Yes, that's the Sugar Hill Gang's historic Rapper's Delight that begins with a scat rap delivery from Wonder Mike. Though Rapper's Delight made this phrase popular, old school historians would likely credit its origin to Keith Cowboy and Lovebug Starsky. This style of rapping is similar to scatting, a jazz vocal style that uses emotive syllables instead of words in solo improvisations on a melody. Scatting was popularized by Louis Armstrong in 1926 when he released his song Heebie Jeebies. Although scatting had already existed before Heebie Jeebies, the song is credited with pioneering the techniques that became a part of modern scatting. Fun fact, the scatting on Heebie Jeebies was not intentional. Armstrong claimed that his sheet music for Heebie Jeebies fell off his stand and, not knowing the lyrics, he instead just made up a melody to fit. Another hip-hop classic to use scatting is Planet Rock by Africa Bambaataa and the Soul Sonic Force from 1982. Just like Armstrong's CBGBs, the part wasn't supposed to happen. According to Tom Silverman, Soul Sonic Force member Pow Wow had forgotten the lyrics he had written down going into the 5th verse of the song, so he improvised instead. Scatting's influence can be felt throughout hip-hop's evolution. Think of the fast raps of Kool Moe Dee, Big Daddy Kane, Busta Rhymes, Twista, and Tech N9ne, or even the hook from this 2014 hit by Rich Gang. There have also been rappers who have shared how jazz influenced their delivery flow. Check out the track Inner City Boundaries by Freestyle Fellowship.
The enemy, friend, and the law, the beginnings and all, the final call, the raw.
The phrasing is irregular throughout. His delivery bouncy and not glued to the tempo of the track, making for moments when he's slightly ahead of the beat. Listen to their track, 6 Tray, where Peace raps over a 6/4 time signature in the song's first minute.
Now that we've offered some examples on how jazz influenced rapping styles in hip-hop, let's move on to another example of the two's cross-pollination: improvisation. Going off the dome and creating in the moment is built into the fabric of both genres. Jazz wouldn't be what it is without soloing, and hip-hop wouldn't be what it is without freestyling. What's the difference between saxophonists Eric Dolphy and Booker Ervin trading 2 and 4 bar solos, and rappers Sky Zoo and Torre going back and forth?
I never wrote it off the top, you know what we like.
Yeah, listen, you got the Barrel Brothers chilling on Sway in the morning. Yeah. Listen to it early in the day while you yawning. Yeah.
Now, let's finally address the topic you're all thinking about: sampling. Sampling is the bread and butter of the pair's cross-pollination. And honestly, we could devote a whole episode to jazz samples and rap solely from the late 80s and early 90s. But first, we have to acknowledge how the breakbeats of hip-hop's early days predated the rise of rap sampling jazz, because those breakbeats were also taken from jazz cuts. You might remember Bob James from the quiz at the top. This is Bob James's Take Me to the Mardi Gras, his 1975 cover of Paul Simon that became one of hip-hop's most recognizable breaks. In hip-hop, the break is all about the drums and percussion. Hip-hop founding figures like DJ Kool Herc are credited with creating the breakbeat, which he did by playing 2 copies of the same record and looping its break. Fellow legend Grandmaster Flash took this further in his own way and often used those first 10 seconds of Take Me to the Mardi Gras to showcase his talents. This break has been sampled by everyone from Run DMC to Missy Elliott. In the 90s, hip-hop producers took it a step further. Producers like DJ Premier, Q-Tip, Pete Rock, and Jay Dilla, as well as groups like A Tribe Called Quest and Diggable Planets, found melody and rhythm through looped drum grooves and saxophone and upright bass parts from jazz tracks. Now, the MCs were the soloists, rapping over an array of songs spanning different eras and subgenres of jazz.
Well, I think especially this era that I came up in music, listening to records like De La Soul and Low End Theory and Midnight Marauders, a lot of these records introduced a whole new generation to jazz music.
Take the track Jazz We've Got by A Tribe Called Quest, which sampled jazz organist Jimmy McGriff's recording of On Green Dolphin Street. McGriff's organ and Sam Jones's bass line are looped. Lucky Thompson's saxophone melody is borrowed for additional color, giving it a gritty and moody feel that complements the punch of the drums.
The jazz, the what? The jazz move that pull the chop originates, that feeling up his ass.
Can you guess which hip-hop song samples this song Stretching by Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers? Yet another hip-hop classic that wouldn't be what it is without an upright bass sample. Here's Rebirth of Slick by Diggable Planets.
Touch the kinks and sinks into the sounds. She frequents deep, fatter joints caught underground.
In Rebirth of Slick, stretching literally becomes stretched. Its fast-paced bebop is much slower in the rap classic. Okay, but where are the samples that use one of jazz's most recognizable instruments, the saxophone? Fear not, my fellow woodwind enthusiasts. Recognize this one?
When they reminisce over you, my God.
That's Pete Rock and CL Smooth's They Reminisce Over You, which samples saxophonist Tom Scott's cover of Jefferson Airplanes, Today.
Now I'm in Pete Rock's band, Soul Brothers. It's interesting now because now when you play with him, he's trying to get you to sound like the out-of-tune sample. The goal is for the drums and everything, that broken kind of programmed feel that they had, the goal is to emulate the things that weren't real from real people.
I've got to fit one more sampling example before we move on. Nas's classic debut, Illmatic. Released in 1994, the album features jazz samples by drummer Joe Chambers, bassist Stanley Clarke, the Heath Brothers, and pianist Ahmad Jamal, the latter of which is the foundation to one of the album's best songs, The World Is Yours.
Whose world is this? The world is yours. The world is yours. It's mine, it's mine. Whose world is this?
Right from the jump, you're hit with a sample from Jamal's I Love Music, taken from the Ahmad Jamal Trio's 1970 album, The Awakening.
So even before tuning in, you knew jazz influenced hip-hop. But what about hip-hop's influence on jazz? Well, throughout the 80s and 90s, some of jazz's most popular figures were exploring this crossover. Jazz icon Herbie Hancock dove into the world of hip-hop with his 1983 hit, Rocket. This track is important for its use of scratching, courtesy of Grand Mixer DXT. The moment validated DJ setups as musical instruments and showed its capabilities as a tool for improvisation. Then, there's Miles Davis's Doo-Bop, the trumpeter's posthumous album from 1992. Davis and Easy had some interesting ideas on here, most notably on the Doo-Bop song. The track had that boom-bap drum beat that had become a staple in NYC hip-hop, as well as a feature from Easy himself.
In the jazz world, do you feel like there has been a big influence from hip-hop to jazz?
Absolutely. Across 3 generations, 80s, 90s, early 2000 kids, that's like your experience. Your experience is growing up listening to hip hop. It's not growing up listening to Duke Ellington or Cab Calloway or Charles Mingus. It's the first experience you get with music is hip hop, R&B, and soul. And you may get your second experience when your mom drags you off to church.
Today's jazz artists are students of both jazz and hip hop. And there's one hip hop producer in particular that left a massive impact, J Dilla.
I think just mainly just Dilla, the way he heard rhythm, like syncopation, melody, harmony, chords. A lot of that stuff was heavily influenced from Herbie Hancock. And
yes.
He embellished on those ideas and it just kept elevating him to use a whole fusion of that stuff. By the time he made it to Welcome to Detroit, it was like another level of just musicology.
I was listening to Herbie's album with Come Running to Me on it. Ooh. And the little bridge part. I was just like, oh my God, this is Get This Money. This is
right.
For sure. You probably know of J Dilla's influence in hip hop, but did you know he influenced modern jazz too? It all begins with Dilla's approach to beat making and the fact that the late producer didn't quantize every aspect of his beats. Quantizing allows beat makers to perfectly subdivide electric drum machine sounds into positions within a measure. If things are slightly off beat, quantizing lines everything up. But like his jazz ancestors, Dilla was all about the feel. Instead of quantizing, Dilla manually did his own drums on his trusty MPC 3000. And also like jazz, a lot of Dilla's drums were swung. Notice the difference between drums that are played straight and drums that are played swung.
Let me entertain you and interface you with the new sound. Sound is the side.
Questlove specifically highlighted this drum pattern in a Red Bull talk, referring to the track as that drunken song when he first saw the Pharcyde perform it.
He found his favorite parts of the record that a lot of people would consider mistakes or like a drummer slipping up or something. And you'd be like, woo, that's crazy. Like, but it never happens twice.
Right.
He found those places that he really loved and he patterned a style after that. You know what I mean? I feel like that's where Dilla came from. And a lot of that had to swing, like, you know, a drummer swinging with the hi-hat and the kick late and the snare early, that type of thing, you know what I mean? And
Word.
And that's the way he heard it, and he would actually play it on the pads that way.
Well, I know you're a huge fan, so I wanted to know how was it talking to Karriem Riggins? Like, what was that experience like for you? Just tell me about it.
He was mad cool. He was super cool. And
they're always so cool.
I know, that's the craziest part. That's the craziest part. Cool. Seeing like, okay, he's a super hip hop dude, but like, he's a legendary jazz drummer. He's like the perfect person, and PBS always gets like the perfect people to talk to, right? But he was like the perfect person because we talking about hip hop and jazz, like that's exactly who he is. One of my mentors tells me that he was like, oh no, Dilla like gave Karriem the formula. Like he was there next to Dilla when he was doing a lot of that stuff.
That's so awesome.
Dilla's style has not only inspired other beat makers, but jazz musicians too. On his 2007 album, In My Element, Glasper included a tribute to Dilla titled J Dillalude, which found him reinterpreting melodies that Dilla looped in his production. Through Dilla, Glasper found ways to bring hip hop and jazz together, both on recordings and live performances. But he took that even further with his Black Radio series, which pairs jazz musicians like himself, Chris Dave, Casey Benjamin, and others with rappers ranging from Lupe Fiasco and Yasin Bey to Common and Snoop Dogg.
In every rap I speak with, I hope you speak it for me if I'm ever speechless.
Now this brings us to the present, where the line that once separated jazz and hip-hop has become very blurred. We're in a post-genre era, and many artists don't want to be put in a box.
I'm so not into now the label of these genres blending because it's so like I listened to hip hop growing up, I listened to jazz and classical and all these things that I love. I feel like it is one thing. Like what you listen to is just like a soup. You can't really define one thing in the soup, but it all makes it incredible.
Kendrick Lamar's groundbreaking To Pimp a Butterfly is a testament to how far that cross-pollination has come. To Pimp a Butterfly was a melting pot of Black music and used jazz in such a creative and meticulous way thanks to musicians like Glasper, Kamasi Washington, Thundercat, and Terrace Martin. The album does more than just bring jazz musicians and rappers together. It explores the musical nuances and sonic subtleties between the two genres.
But To Pimp a Butterfly is but one example of how varied this cross-pollination is today. No Name, Flying Lotus, Kamasi Washington, Thundercat, Louis Cole, Shabazz Palaces, Hiatus Coyote, Moonchild, Standing on the Corner, Masego, Nabaya Garcia, Melanie Charles, Bad Bad Not Good, Nujabes. So many artists and groups across the world are defining and redefining that relationship. Even internet subgenres like lo-fi hip-hop play a part in this. Lo-fi hip-hop live streams on YouTube utilize jazz's distinct chord progressions and the drunken swing of Dilla.
The cross-pollination of jazz and hip-hop isn't just a fad, but it's something that continues to have an impact. It's constantly evolving, and it's moving to its own beat. Now, let's check out the jazz and hip-hop inspired track that Linda and I have been working on.
It's interesting because I was expecting something that was like, okay, so when I think of hip-hop and jazz, the people around me, it's very like jazz hop, and that's not what you did, not in a bad way. Like, I feel like the way you did it was so creative and like unique to you.
I was really struggling, you know, but I think like the pressure of like, okay, Karriem is gonna hear this. Robert Glasper might hear this, Terrace might hear this, like, so it has to be good. But then I just settled with the idea like, well, if I like it, if I dig it, you know, and if I like what happens, like, it'll be fine. All my keys be like this, play like this. I don't play like full fingers, full hands. All my joints be like layer, layer. I call that cheating. People be like, no, that's producing. That's how you get it done.
It is.
I was up at like 4 a.m. thinking about like, okay, what am I gonna do for this song? I just did a groove that I dig. Kind of in between swung and straight. If you listen and you can't really tell if it's swung all the way or straight all the way. I like that cloudiness.
I ended up like writing in the spaces in between as opposed to like on top of the melodies that existed intentionally for rhythm's sake. I think, I could have added like 6 different harmonies and that would have been very jazz. I think.
Right, super.
Yeah, but I was like, I'm gonna just have this one harmony.